Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 184 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer, director, producer J.J. Abrams and his extended Bad Robot universe. I'm Matt Crandall, here with my co-host Marcelo Inostroza, as we continue to talk about the J.J. Abrams produced Apple TV Plus miniseries, Presumed Innocent, from executive producer David E. Kelly. Today we are talking about episode 6, The Elements. Marcelo, is it a net win, a net loss, or the darkest hour of your fucking life?
This episode, I would, patch it up to the darkest hour of my life. I loved this episode because this episode goes back to episodes of Law and Order that I used to watch as a kid, and it's really, really, really lovely watching these fucking lawyers actually do lawyering stuff in an actual trial after being teased with it for 5.5 episodes. My favorite thing about this episode was watching my least favorite character in the show be put on his toes constantly by the name of Tommy. It was brilliant seeing Tommy and Raymond fight each other in court, and I was very surprised that Rusty stayed quiet in court. Of course, he had to, because if he didn't, he was gonna fuck himself even more. But but this episode was a really, really, really hard. It was a terrifying delight, if that's even a word to watch. If I could use that word.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so, last week the trial began and we saw Tommy kind of hitting it out of the park in his opening remarks. And then we pick up with the medical examiner right at the start of this episode on the stand, Dr. Kumagai, who we know that last week Tommy and him were rehearsing. And he was like, "Hey man, respect me, I'm a doctor." And Tommy was like, "Yeah, I respect you as a doctor, but as a witness, you've been known to shit the bed." And I really like the way that this scene plays out, because Kumagai does what he's supposed to. He gives the information, lays it out that Rusty, was acting odd. He was investigating this stuff. He had the whole thing about Carolyn, how she was murdered, and we really see in graphic detail how she was murdered. So we do see her fall over, her skull get bashed in. They talk about how her brain tissue would expand because it was swelling and it was trying to escape through the fractures, and like really disgusting, sick descriptions. But then, so Tommy does a great job at first. And then, "Raymond, do you want to cross?" And he's like, "No, I just got a small thing." And I love that De La Guardia is like, "We got this, just leave it, it's fine." And Tommy's like, "Nope, now that it's my turn, after they were just gonna let it lie," he's like, "Let me get in there again." And of course he fucks up because Kumagai does have a vendetta against Rusty. He hated the guy, and that comes to light. And it comes to light that he thinks Rusty's an asshole, he thinks Raymond is an asshole. And I just love that Tommy overplays his hand because he was so confident. And De La Guardia is like, "Dude, we had them. We had the perfect amount, and you wanted to be hot shot and rub it in Rusty's face, and it blew up in our fucking face." And I like when Tommy's like, "No, I think it's fine. They got a little ahead, we got ahead. It's a net zero." And he's like, No, it's a fucking loss. We did terrible in there." And I like that Tommy doesn't see it because he's starting to get this inflated ego now that Rusty is out of the way. And he does have this personal vendetta against Rusty that is kind of blinding him. And more of that comes to light later. But in these first moments, I really liked that last week Tommy got a shining moment and immediately he blows it. So what are you thinking? And Raymond plays it perfect because Raymond could have gone after the guy when they were on the stand initially, but he kind of lets it lie until Tommy opens the door, and then he's like, "Okay, the gloves are off. We were just gonna let this be a nothing testimony." And then it ends up becoming this heated thing where Kumagai looks unprofessional, Tommy looks like an idiot. How are you feeling after that, the brutal Carolyn description, and then Tommy fumbles?
I am convinced that Raymond knew that under serious amount. I am convinced that Raymond knew that under serious amounts of pressure, Tommy was going to fold, and that's exactly what he did. Tommy was okay for a second, but after that cross examination from Raymond, like you said, Matt, he fucking folded because Tommy wants to get Rusty so bad, and I disagree that with you that Tommy is his ego is inflating. His ego has been up here the whole time. I mean, but right now, with the trial actually being started, we're actually seeing how big his ego actually is. Before, we were just like, this guy's a fucking dick, and I had concerned in weeks past that his ego was going to cost him in the trial, and that's almost exactly what happened in this first scene. The other thing that I was really, really happy with is I was really happy that the ME basically imploded because, every scene that we've seen with the ME, like Matt said, he has come off as a very, very professional guy, but he's an asshole. Like everybody in this show is almost their own particular kind of asshole. So I was just really, really pleased that Tommy got his comeuppance in this early scene.
Yeah, it's really satisfying for us as an audience. And we move from that into a scene where, Rusty and Barbara are together with the lawyers and they're talking about optics. And they're like, guys, body language reads a lot. Like, we had a good win today because Tommy fucked up, but the body language of you guys in the courtroom is not a united front. Like, you guys are positioned, Rusty, you're coming off like a creep. Barbara, you're coming off like you think your husband might have done it. And Barbara gets a nice moment where she gets that, big speech where she does say this is the darkest hour of her fucking life, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, not for you and not that jury. And we really feel her pain about, like, everything that she has to hear in this courtroom is just like a small little needle back into a wound, reminding her of how Rusty fucked up, how Rusty was obsessed with Carolyn, how people around the office knew what was going on because we get the other lawyer testifies about how, she caught them once and she would see them arguing and Carolyn tried to smooth it over. And Barbara has to hear all of this, and it's got to be pretty difficult. And so later in the episode, to kind of needle Rusty, she comes clean about the bartender, and he doesn't know what to say because obviously he can't be that mad because he would be a hypocrite. But also she's telling him this now after months of this happening to kind of, stick it to him at like his darkest point, using her own words, the darkest hour of his fucking life too, because this is where he is now actually, as he says, fighting for his life. Because if that jury gets swayed because of something that they perceive from the body language between him and Barbara, he could go to jail for life. So how do you feel the whole, them being on the same team, but also in private, she does come clean to Rusty as Jake is getting undressed. And, there's like I was like, who decided that we had to have this ass shot of Jake Gyllenhaal with this bright light? And he's like striking a pose as his wife is confessing to cuckolding him, sort of. And he's posing nude while she says this.
Look, I really think it's impossible for Jake and Barbara to really, really show a united front while they're at the trial because so much has happened between the two of them and so much distrust has been seeded in between the two of them because of Rusty's actions. And I really like what Barbara says to Raymond and what Barbara says to the lady who is the second chair, because as a human being that's been cheated on and as a human being who has been lied to in the way that Barbara has, you can only support another person who has wronged you so much. There has to be a point where you say no more, and I ain't gonna take this shit anymore. And Barbara, from a character point of view, has been the one person in the whole show that has been sort of shit on this entire time. And despite the fact that she's been shit on this entire time, she's been expected to go along with everything because that's the role that she's been expected to play. The understanding wife, the supportive mother, the supportive partner. But the thing that I like about that scene with Raymond in the second chair is the fact that Barbara said, I ain't going to take it anymore, and it's the darkest time of my life. Now to address the other scene in the bedroom when Jake, strips down and poses nude in the closet, I was like, Okay. Okay. That was funny to me. Sorry. Um, I really like that Barbara feels the need to be honest with Rusty in this moment of vulnerability for the two of them, because Barbara is doing the one thing that Rusty is incapable of doing. Barbara actually admitted her failure as a partner, and the way that Rusty reacted, I thought was very 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 muted for him. Because if this scene happened earlier in the series, I guarantee you that Rusty would have shouted in her fucking face. But Rusty has been so battered and bruised and beaten down by life, by this whole trial, that I really thought that Jake's performance was muted, and it was quite. I thought it was right on the money. I thought it was right on the money, because I feel that someone who is going someone who is going through something like this would actually feel like this. The thing that I don't like is that at one point, in the conversation, Jake goes, "Well, did you fuck him?" And the camera pans over to Barbara, and she says, "No." And then she says it again, "No." And I was like, "You judgmental fucking prick! Do you realize what you've not only done to her, but what you've done to your children, what you've done to everybody who knows you as professionally? How dare you question if she fucked that guy? If she fucked that guy, she was in her own right. I don't know what the fuck I don't know what the fuck. I mean, what the fuck do you expect her to be like? What the hell? Do you expect her not to have any reaction whatsoever?
Yeah, he's asking too much, and like he can be upset, but this is all his own doing. So if his wife runs into the bartender's arms, and if she did screw him, it's because of the emotional turmoil she's been through because of his infidelity. So it really is tough to feel sorry for him in those moments. But as he said, I'm fighting for my life here. So like, I kind of get it. And we do get some scenes with him and the daughter. So Rusty and Jaden, she's like, "Hey, do you want me to come with you?" He's like, "No." And he realizes that he kind of snapped at her, and then she comes back and they have like a tender hug. But then she starts talking to him later about trauma and disassociation from trauma. Now, she talks about how people can have done something so traumatic that their brain disassociates and shuts it out, so they might not even know that they did it. Which is kind of going back to the One Tree Hill Breaking Bad fugue state sort of idea, where, you don't know about certain things that happen because your brain protects you from it by shutting it out. And the way Rusty receives this information isn't like, a light bulb going off or anything. But we start to wonder, is she saying this because she thinks maybe he did it and he's blacked it out? Or maybe somebody else did it and has blocked it out? How did you interpret this scene that in a show where everything, even if it is full of some red herrings, this seemed like a pretty deliberate, especially in an episode that doesn't have like there's not a lot of extra scenes in this episode. It's pretty streamlined and pretty important, where everything is character or plot. What did you make of this scene between Rusty and his daughter?
I really like the scene between Rusty and JJ, because I thought it was very poignant for his daughter to ask dissociative memory, because I think if Rusty did indeed do it, I think that's what he has. That's why every time that we see him running on the treadmill, or every time that we see him swimming in the pool, he's remembering facts about his relationship with Karen and experiences that he had with Carolyn while he was fucking her. But because of his memory issues, what Rusty is remembering when he's seeing images of Carolyn throughout their relationship, what he's seeing, it's very, very possible that isn't actually what happened. What actually may have happened is he actually may have killed Carolyn in a moment of passion and a moment of madness. And if that's indeed what happened, if that's indeed what actually happened, with JJ bringing this up to him, I think it's really, really interesting, because that sort of puts the seed into the audience's brain. Well, maybe Rusty did do this. The other thing that I thought about, I'm like, wait a minute. If Rusty didn't do this, if the son didn't do this, if Tommy didn't do this, who is the most innocent person in this family, and who is the person that has been behind Rusty the whole entire time, but we know very, very little about, is JJ. JJ has been there in the background and supported, but wait a minute. What if she actually killed Carolyn? So this scene really, really served multiple levels. It really cast a negative light on Rusty, if that was even more possible. But it actually opened up my suspect book a little bit, and I'm thinking about JJ now as a potential murderer for Carolyn.
Right. So Jaden, especially in this episode, I was gonna say you got JJ on the JJ on the brain, and everybody hopefully knows who you were talking about, not Mr. Abrams, but the daughter Jaden. Starting last week, they started including more scenes with Jaden and Rusty, and that carried over this week. And Kyle has now kind of taken a back seat, and Jaden is kind of the kid getting the attention. So it does seem, again, that whole disassociative speech. You're like, why is this scene here? Like, David E. Kelly doesn't throw in scenes that aren't going to go somewhere. So I started getting some radar pings watching it the first time about that moment. Now, I do want to say all the courtroom stuff, we talked in depth about the first scene, but then there are two other like key moments in the trial. And as much as Tommy and De La Guardia took hits in the first scene where he fucks up, like all Rusty's team does in this episode is win and win and win, because then we get the associate from the law firm on the stand who is testifying about Carolyn and Rusty's relationship at work and how Rusty had unprofessional behavior because he was texting during work. He was obsessed, all of that. But Maya on our team says, have you ever known Carolyn to, make a complaint about Rusty's behavior at work? And they're like, no. Has she ever made a complaint about anyone at work? Yes. Who did she make a complaint about? Tommy fucking Malto. Oh, really? Yeah, why? Because Tommy Malto gave her the ick, and she didn't want to work with him. And in the year of our Lord 2024, saying somebody gives you the ick is about as damning a statement as you can make. So for this jury to hear this from Maya and the witness, that Carolyn didn't feel safe and didn't want to have anything to do with Tommy while Tommy is in the courtroom, and they have the camera work in this sequence is great because the close-ups of Tommy as all of this go down are framed so well that like we can just read Sarsgaard's face and every like micro thing that he does. As you see, like he's on the defensive. He doesn't think that this is gospel that Carolyn hated him, and obviously we know that he like kind of fancied her, but she shut him down, and now he's trying to play it off like it is less than it was, and that he doesn't have a vendetta against Rusty. But this whole part of the trial really looks bad for Team Tommy.
This was actually my favorite sequence of the episode because it was really great watching Tommy squirm. And I would like to echo your sentiments. The camera work while this testimony is happening is fantastic. I love the way that Tommy squirms in the chair, and also I love as we go through the scene, we see flashes of what the person on the stand is actually referencing. So I think that's a great visual cue that the director and David E. Kelly and his co-writers used to really, really drive the point home that there were certain people in the office that knew about Rusty and Carolyn's affair, but they just didn't say anything because they were nice people and they possibly knew how important Carolyn and Rusty were to the firm in general. But you know what? Listen, Tommy is a dick, but this episode also did something for me that hasn't happened yet. I felt bad for the guy because everybody fucking hates him. Everyone. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy goes home in this episode and he has like one fucking cat, right? That's it. He has a cat. That's it. So essentially, he's a fucked up evil cat person.
Yeah. Well, and even Raymond's wife says like, oh, you almost feel bad for him. And Raymond's like, yeah, you almost would if he wasn't such a piece of shit. And we do see him go home to just a cat. And like, it's the highlight of his day that his cat is there, who also looks like he wants nothing to do with Tommy. So he lives a pretty sad existence where, at work, he's used to being second fiddle and nobody really cares about him. And then he goes home to a cat that also could barely give a shit. So they are trying to make us feel sorry for him, but as people in this episode said, like, he brought it on himself. Like, don't feel sorry for him. It's just who he is. But I thought it was interesting that, we are seeing a little bit of his home life. So they are trying to make us sympathize a little bit. And that might just be trying to get us maybe to give him a little grace so that if something happens in the case, we're a little bit more understanding with it in terms of Tommy's side. The other great thing is when Raymond basically talks to the expert who is talking about the particles of skin under Carolyn's fingernails. And so he does a good job of establishing, they're like, yeah, Rusty's skin was under there. And he's like, pieces of skin? They were like, no, like microscopic particles of skin. And of course, the prosecution had made it sound like that could only happen because she was scratching him because he was trying to murder her. And Raymond says, would these same particles be there if she had kissed him and, caressed his face a little bit hard? And they were like, yeah. And he's like, okay, great. So these particles could be there because he killed her or she kissed him, which is such a fine line. And I just like where he's like, okay, so this evidence means fuck all because she could either have just done it because she was into it. And if there's not actual pieces of skin, the fact that, it probably is unlikely that she was fighting back against him, because then you would actually have physical pieces of skin, not just these particles. But it's a big win for Raymond because the prosecution, was really banking on this being like part of their slam dunk, because it was this information that got them to take any sort of pleas off the table. Even though Rusty was never going to take the plea, it's when they present this as like their trump card, the skin particles under the nails, and Raymond fucking gets that garbage out of here in the trial, because there's no way the jury is now going to think that those particles mean anything, because the amount of contact needed is so minimal.
I do want to say Raymond is so good at his job. For this whole episode, I thought Raymond was a good lawyer. I thought he was very capable, but I thought that he only wanted this case to get back at the people that beat him in the election. I thought that pressure of him wanting to beat these motherfuckers and Tommy and LaGuardia so bad was going to cost him big time in the trial. But like you pointed out last week about Tommy, these people might be a nervous wreck before they have to go on stage, but once they go on stage, they turn it on, and when they turn it on, they're fucking great.
And of course, that pressure they have been alluding to, and this episode does end with Raymond having a fucking heart attack or something in the courtroom. How do you feel? What's happening here?
This is not good. If Raymond goes, Rusty is fucked, because there's no way in hell that the judge that is looking over this case would let Rusty defend himself. There's no way. And if Raymond goes, I don't think the second chair, I'm forgetting her name, guys, but it's me, would be able to bring it home. But that scene really continued a masterful writing class by David E. Kelley and his other writers for giving us hooks at the end of every episode, making us want to watch the next episode and to see what happens. But that scene scared the ever-living shit out of me, because I'm like, if this guy is having a heart attack, Rusty is fucked. He's dead. And also, I was oddly concerned about his safety, but I also like how David E. Kelley and the writers sort of queued this scene up in the previous episode when Raymond was sort of sitting down and he was up, but this was like before his head exploded. Like this whole series, Raymond has been eating unhealthy. He drinks coffee, he eats fatty foods. He just does everything that you're not supposed to do for a person of his age and weight and the pressure that he's under. So it makes sense why he had a vent in the courtroom.
Yeah, they've been heavily foreshadowing it before, even so much so that I was like, okay, I won't be surprised if next week we find out this is some sort of fever dream and we just get out of it. But it seems unlikely that it would be a panic attack, because they weren't doing terrible in the court case, so it's not advantageous. But again, panic attacks are not rational. They just come on randomly without, you're controlling it. So it could be, but it certainly seemed like maybe a heart attack or something. And that will put Rusty and the legal team on the back foot because Maya might not be experienced enough to bring this home. And it would seem like, are they going to be crazy enough to try and get Rusty to defend himself? Which is where they could really let Jake loose with a few big swinging monologues if they were trying to make an Emmy play. So I wouldn't be too surprised, even if in real life, like, no fucking way. But this is TV, and we only have 2 episodes left. So as you said, things are coming to an head. They are almost at the conclusion because this was episode 6 out of 8. Next week, we will be talking about episode 7, The Witness. So if you are watching along with us, that will be what we're at. Guys, if you like the show, please like, follow, subscribe. Check us out anywhere you get podcasts or YouTube, or Marcelo's got a bunch of Discord, Facebook, whatever going on. Check all that out. Send us a comment, ask us a question. We'll read it on the show. And we appreciate you listening this far. If you want to get in touch with me, only place to do that is on letterboxd.com. Letterboxd.com/MDC3000. We can log some movies. Marcelo is still open to feedback and conversation. Marcelo, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, if you guys want to reach out to me about anything having to do with Bad Robot or anything at all, you can reach me at Twitter or X, whatever you call it. I'm at CreekFanatic88. And thank you guys so much for still listening to us after this long. Thank you.
Thanks again. So that'll do it for this week. Until next time, Radio 815, over and out.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.